Well, it's Christmas time, and I'm really delighted to speak with the author of a great new Christmas book. You're going to love it. I'll be right back. Hey there, everybody. It's Mike Creavey from thegraciousguest.org here with you. The Gracious Guest Show coming at you right now, and it's Christmas time. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel, like this content, share it far and wide. This was a really neat conversation. And we talk about a lot of different stuff here on the show, from mysteries of the faith, the Shroud of Turin, spiritual warfare, exorcism, prayer life, and I did an Advent video not too long ago to set up basically this Christmas season, which we are now in, and this is just a really, really wonderful time of year. It's probably my favorite time of year for a lot of different reasons. And with me today to talk about his new book, Christmas in Idaho, which looks like this. We'll talk about it a little bit later, is author Ray Downing, and I want to share from Ray's biography here. Ray is an Emmy award-winning 3D computer graphics illustrator and animator. In a career that spans 3 decades, Ray has produced artwork for the scientific, medical, and broadcast industries, and you may be familiar with his work Stealing Lincoln's Body, The Real Face of Jesus, and Jesus the Lost 40 Days on the History Channel, which were really just amazing shows that really showcased Ray's talent and were incredible. With the Stealing Lincoln's biography, he created a series of 3D computer graphic animations and brought Abraham Lincoln back to life for a television audience. For this work, Ray received an Emmy Award for individual achievement in a craft, and then he later on sort of segued into The Real Face of Jesus on the History Channel, which was one that I saw back at the time. I also saw the Stealing Lincoln's Body. I know a lot of people did. So it's really delightful to get to connect with Ray. But he's here today to talk about this book, Christmas in Idaho, which is a project where Ray is really focused on trying to take back Christmas. We've titled this episode that very thing, Taking Back Christmas. What does he mean by that? What is the book about? What are the different layers of storytelling that Ray engages in? And how can you get your copy? All of that and more straight ahead. Let's jump right in. So Ray Downing, thank you so much for being my gracious guest today.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And full disclosure, as people that watch this channel are aware, just the nature of scheduling. We're doing this in November, so it's not even Thanksgiving yet as we're having this conversation. It's even silly. I'm wearing this, I don't know what, palm tree shirt or something. So I don't have my Christmas stuff out in the room yet, but we're here to talk about Christmas. We're releasing this episode on December 22nd. So when people are watching it, it's going to be all over the place. So we're going to have a good discussion about the book and Christmas. But just before we begin, folks heard the specific bio at the beginning of the show, but why don't you just share whatever you like about your own background and kind of maybe what brought you to this particular project.
Okay. I'm a 3D computer graphic artist, and I've been a commercial artist for my whole life, mostly in scientific, medical. Late in my career, everything became digital, and I started doing animations and 3D computer graphics, and so it completely changed. At that point, I decided I wanted to do some TV. And I did 2. I wrote, starred in, and made graphics for 2 History Channel specials. The first one was on Abraham Lincoln. For me, it was a challenge because doing humans back then, and I'm talking, this is 2008,
okay,
was something everybody wanted to do, and nobody was able to do successfully. So I figured I'd resurrect Abraham Lincoln. And approached the History Channel. They loved it. They loved the idea. And so that was my first excursion into television.
Sure.
Great reviews. And then an executive from the History Channel came by, says, "What else you got?" He came to the studio. "I want to see how you're doing what you do, and what else you got?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on Jesus." I said, "What do you mean you're working on Jesus?" I said,
That'll get their attention.
Yeah, exactly. So I said, there's a thing called the Shroud of Turin, and it has 3D information. As it turns out, I'm a 3D computer graphic artist, and I want to go in there, get that information, and see if I can make a new portrait of Jesus. Well, by the time I was done with it, I not only did portraits, but I had Jesus animated. So I kept it very, very tight to the vest for the first show and just did a reveal of the face. When that aired, our phones lit up. Every country in the world was on the phone. The Russians from I forget what it's called, Channel One or such a thing like that, actually came to the country, to our studio, to interview me. It was a big success for History Channel and for us. And then I followed up with another History Channel show, which was called The Lost 40 Days. And The Lost 40 Days featured animations of Jesus in his post-resurrection appearances. Also did very, very well. And I started with the success having to do with Easter. I said, I got to do something for Christmas because it's just drifting away. The problem is that with every successive year, Christmas is becoming less Christmassy. I mean, not like people don't celebrate it. 93% of Americans celebrate Christmas.
Right.
How many of those people are Christian? 60, 63%. And it's going down by 10 percentage points every 10 years. So you just project that forward, and Christmas is going to be completely secular. So what I wanted to do is say, okay, so you've shouted down what happened 2,000 years ago. I'm going to bring it back, and I'm going to bring it back in the form of a book, where in that I'm going to refocus, hit the reset button on Christmas and make it new again. And that's what the objective in this recent book has been.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that before we jump into the book, I got to say the Abraham Lincoln program and the Real Face of Jesus, I did catch those. I remember when they came out, and that was so interesting when you reached out and we made contact. I was just it hit me right away. I was like, oh yeah, that was just, and I remember, the moment that the reveal happens with the animation, especially on Jesus's face, was just, it was just so different, right, than anything we had seen at that point, and it was very powerful, very powerful indeed. I gotta say here with this Christmas book, and let me just hold it up here. So all the links are below and everything. So I'll hold it up here. So Christmas in Idaho. All right. And right off the bat, as soon as I got my copy, when, you sent this to me very graciously, and, this is it's a big thing for me, increasingly so over the years, is just beautiful things, like tangible, quality products of almost any kind catch my eye more and more, because I think we've all gotten so used to just things just being mass produced and cheap and quickly degradable. Nothing is really made to last. There's not a whole lot that comes out, I feel like that would be heirloom quality. And this has got to be the most beautiful, just binding I think I've seen of anything in recent years. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's got the gilded pages, and then of course you flip to the back, and we have the audio recording here, the narration. Would you call it it's almost like a radio drama kind of feel, right? It's not just an audio book. There's a whole score and sound effects and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, usually the audio books are just a reading. Now people have started to put a little bit of music between chapters, things like that. But I wanted a more cinematic effect, and because music certainly can reach people even more than the spoken word. Put the two together, and you've got an experience. And that's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a Christmas experience, and beautiful, sincere, because it certainly is, and meaningful. It's an allegorical story, which means it operates on more than one level. It's got the literal storyline level, and below that are different levels of meaning. And sort of like Christmas Carol with Dickens, it has the story of Ebenezer Scrooge and Tiny Tim and that kind of stuff. But below it is another level of meaning, which is social commentary. He has a humanitarian approach, and what he's not looking for salvation in the biblical sense, and he almost never references Christ in it. I think the title, Christmas Carol, is about the only reference in it. He references the title with the nephew, and then later on he also references it might be pleasant for people to see who made blind beggars walk and blind men see, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's really a humanitarian and social
Yeah.
code, I think. I wanted to go
That
beyond
that
that and bring it right back 2,000 years to the original
right.
meaning of Christmas.
I have to confess, and people who know me well are maybe chuckling at this point because they know what I'm going to say. But that line, when Bob Cratchit mentions to his wife as he comes in, having gone to church with Tiny Tim, and makes that comment about how, Tiny Tim said that it would be, it would do people some good to see him, being disabled, being crippled, because they would remember on this day, the one who made the blind to see and the lame to walk and all that. And every single time I read that line, I should have it memorized by now. I literally start to weep. Like, it just happens to me. Like, it's such a beautiful line. But I will say, for this book, it didn't take more than just a few pages for me to just really, kind of get an initial feel here of what I can only describe as there's something like a charming kind of familiarity about it, but it was strange because it's this totally unique, story. But there's just so much about it that, feels, I think, right. It felt, it felt like a story, that I had grown up with or something like that, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else has said that to you as well, but there is definitely that kind of classic Christmas, charm, I think, to it. That was something that jumped out at me right away.
Well, I tried to keep everything that I love about Christmas. Like, people go on about the commercialization of Christmas as if selling firecrackers at the 4th of July ruined it, or a turkey ruins Thanksgiving. It doesn't.
Yeah,
I love Christmas trees, and I love
yeah,
the snow and the carols, everything about it. Okay, and that for me is not what's ruining Christmas. What's ruining it is the deliberate absence of the original Christmas story. That it's a holiday devoid of meaning these days,
right,
and consequently, a day of peace is now a day of pressure. Okay. But in the writing of the story, I want to include those Christmassy feels and a Christmassy setting, and write it in sort of a new style that I don't usually write in, so that that the love was palpable and the friendliness of it was palpable. And in fact, the first line of it is based on Dickens. Dickens' first line was, "Marley was dead to begin with." So I made my first line similar declarative sentence. The first snows of winter are the magical ones. And so I just actually based that format. Okay, let's talk directly to the audience and just make a statement and go on from there and build on that. And that's where that came from, actually.
Well, and that it is, there is this kind of catching your attention, kind of getting you in this, and I don't want to give too much away. That's the hard part of it, of course, giving too many plot points away. But just the style of writing, the description of it. I mean, I really, as I'm going through it, especially maybe at this time of year, getting ready for all of this to kind of be upon us soon enough. I can already start to smell, the way that the air changes, right? As you're getting close to winters, you can start to taste this. And I don't think it's any mistake that in the Lord's providence, we have it at this time of year, which again, depends on where you live in the world. Like, a lot of places are not going to have those same, meteorological kind of connections with this time of year. Our friends in Australia, for example, just, you might not get the same kind of thing, but certainly for me, I could kind of taste it. I could smell it. It establishes this scene where we get the snowman showing up, Idaho, of course, as the title. And I don't know how much you want to get into detail on that. I was going to ask you as far as allegory and that kind of thing with his, Christmas in Idaho, right?
Yes.
I mean, as I'm reading it, I'm seeing that. Yeah. Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Oh, it's a redirect. It's a misdirect, actually. Yeah. People will look at it and say, "Oh, it's like Christmas in Connecticut," which is a horrible movie.
Right.
But and it's not that one of the first things is, okay, you're going to learn something different. It's not what you thought, and that feeling goes throughout the book. It's not what you thought. Idaho is a person. He's named after a potato sack vest that a snowman is wearing. So we're going to revisit Christmas through the eyes of a snowman born on a Christmas Eve with no background. He has
Mm-hmm.
nothing. Like when we're born, we start to accumulate experiences. We interact with the world. We get bumped and bruised and happy and sad, and we learn who we
Yeah.
are by interacting with the world. Well, you get to do that through this baby, which is Idaho. Doesn't look like a baby. He looks more like Jackie Gleason, but he's a rotund, uh, jovial snowman with a certain sadness about him. And now we want to take a look at the world and Christmas through his eyes. There's
Yeah.
another thing about it. It's backward in time. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is he's born and he's outside of a house and family's inside and he gets to look in the window and experience Christmas through them. He actually goes
Right.
into the house and experiences Christmas, but it's Christmas today. It's all the
Right.
decorations and all the other things that surround Christmas, but nothing about any meaning. And then,
And he's by himself, right?
and he's all by himself,
Yeah.
he forms associations with an angel atop the tree. It's the first time he's ever seen a female, and he likes
Mm-hmm.
it. So
Mm-hmm.
he's not a baby. He's something more mature, but all his experiences are only what he's had in that Christmas Eve. And the
Right.
turning point, and you can tell this, that everything is going cool, everything's going fine, and he's really loving everything, except he picks up a book and it's Frosty the Snowman.
Yep.
And when he
Yeah.
turns to the last page of the books, he's a snowman, Frosty's a snowman, and Frosty melts.
Yeah.
He doesn't know anything
Yeah.
about any of this stuff. Now, what does that have to do with Christianity? What does melting have to do with Christianity? Is supposed to tell you how to never melt in snowman terms. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. Now, people think that Luke and Matthew is the only place in the New Testament that refers to Christmas. No, it's in John chapter 3, where he says that famous, I think it's, I know it's chapter 3, but about God sent his son, his only son,
Right.
so that
Right.
he who believes in him would never perish. I've asked people, Christians, so give me a couple of sentences that say, what is the actual meaning of Christianity? And they,
Yeah.
they're stumped. And it's right there
Like being
concisely in John.
nice and
Yes, don't hit your sister and don't mix
right.
drinks.
Don't rock the boat. Yeah, like just
Exactly. But it's a fantastical thing. It's God sends his only begotten son. God so loved the world that he sent his only son, that he who believes in him shall not perish. It's about mortality. It's not saving you from sin.
Right.
We all sin, okay? In fact, in some interpretations, even being and interacting with the world is a sin, okay? But it's about eternal life. It's about not dying. It's defeating death. And so in this story, Idaho gets his first notion of his vulnerability, that someday spring is going to come and he has had it. That ruins Christmas for him. He leaves the house half blind with fear and remorse and goes into the outside. Now he lives in a isolated house surrounded by woods and wanders into the woods following the sound of distant bells. And he just feels that there's music there, that it's joyful, and he wants to go there. And that takes him out of this, I can't do anything about a thing. He's got to do something, and he just wanders off into the woods. That's where his adventure actually begins.
Right. Well, and I want to back up if I could for just a sec, because it was this transition really, well, it's right before the Frosty story, but when his reflection on music, which was so interesting, because he's playing around with the record player, and and that reflection on music, it connects to some earlier kind of allegorical things he's been wondering about, a dream he's had. There's these themes that start to play out where he, like you said, he only has a beginning right at this point. Like everything is measured from this beginning he just had. Time itself is new to him. He comes into existence kind of basically fully sentient, so you don't have this long protracted childhood or something of learning about time, which, I think if we all remember when we were kids, how long it seemed like it would be till we got to second grade, And
Oh,
then you're
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like, I'll be 12 someday. But then, of course, as we live longer, those same amounts of time get shorter and shorter. There's, less of a
Absolutely.
percentage of how long you've lived. So all that's kind of hitting him at once. And he listens to this music and has this fascinating reflection about, like, is time this essential, component in music? And I love that line you had, if I can just share it, if that's okay, where he said, I just brought it up here. It's right here. So yeah, surely if all the notes were played at once, it would only be a tremendous noise. And I thought that I just really found myself reflecting on that on the second, read through or listening to the CD version of it. It really did hit me. I thought that is just that's a powerful thought. We don't think about things like that. Why do we love music, but music of its nature has this movement, this creative kind of fluidity in it, and it's like he's kind of tapping into that same reality in himself.
Good. It's a good observation. I'm glad you picked up on it because it's one of the major themes in it. As we said, allegories have several layers of meaning, and you've gone down to the third one. Okay. Past the storyline, you're going
Yeah.
down into a deep cosmological mystery. Time is a mystery. Okay. And the notion of dimensionality is something most people don't understand. Like with my work on the Shroud of Turin, one of the things about the Shroud is you've got three-dimensional information, maybe, in a two-dimensional way. So what is two-dimensional? What's one-dimensional? Most people walking around don't analyze things on a dimensional basis. So to run through it really, really quickly,
Yeah,
a point is no dimension. A point is a concept. It's just an idea. Take that point and move it, and you've made a line. Take that line and move it, and you've got like a sheet of paper. If you can think of that line describing a sheet, that's two dimensions, plane. Take that sheet and move it away from itself, perpendicular to itself. You've got a cube. Okay?
Right.
Those are the three dimensions. How many dimensions can you perceive? From your point of view, what is the world?
Yeah.
3D.
I mean, I think 3D, yeah.
But
right.
the problem is you have no three-dimensional receptors. People have no physical way of perceiving the third dimension. So what do? You have eyes separated in space. Space and time are interconnected by relativity theory. So they're never simultaneous. They're separated in space, and they give you two images. You compare the images in your brain, and you conclude three-dimensionality. You never experience it.
Right.
You're making a conclusion. It's conceptual. Okay? So getting back to the point about music, have you ever heard music? Not without time, you haven't. But if you think of Let It Be or Hey Jude or some song or Yesterday that you go, oh yeah, I've got a conceptual, I know what that is. You say Yesterday and I know the song. You're not going through every note, but you have a conceptual grasp of what it is, but you have never experienced it as a whole. Okay. What you've done is you've taken a series of two-dimensional information, put it over time, and then made a conceptual pattern of that in your brain. Okay. So when Jesus, for example, says that there's this other place he's calling the kingdom, and it's not going to come by here it is or there it is. He's saying you're not going to be able to locate it in space. Okay. And it won't become like that. It's already here, but men don't perceive it. So what's the thing you can't perceive? The third dimension. Now, it goes even deeper than that. When you say, well, it comes down to information. I interact with the world and I'm getting information from it. It's like smelling incense, it's just, you are aware of it, but it doesn't have any substantial aspect to it. So the thing Jesus is talking about that's here, but men don't perceive it, could very well be the third dimension because you have no three-dimensional receptors. And questions like, where did Jesus go? That he could come and go in front of the apostles in the post-resurrection period? How is he doing that? Okay, you have to realize that you've been conned. You think you hear music and you've never experienced music. You've experienced a sequential series of notes in time, but you've never had three-dimensional experience of music, and it's three-dimensional information. You just don't have the receptors. You don't receive three-dimensional information from space or your environment. So why do people go around saying that the world is 3 dimensions plus time? Because of a guy called Minkowski. Einstein didn't say that. The original configuration of relativity isn't configured like that. Minkowski did it because it was easier to deal with mathematically. At the end of his life, Einstein deeply regretted that, and would only talk to actually one person at the end of his life. And that person was probably, I'd say, the second greatest logician to ever have lived. And he wrote a paper and showed that when you look at general relativity, that there's no such thing as sequential time within the theory if the theory is correct. And Einstein intuitively sort of knew it. He got pushed into this four-dimensional space-time. I would suggest that Jesus knew what he was doing, and he knew how he was doing it, and that the New Testament is not only written for the people who experienced Jesus as a physical man, for people who would come later and know more than the audience Jesus was addressing at the time. So if you went back in time to the Council of Hippo and said, okay, we're going to look at the New Testament, but I'm going to throw in the Dirac equation, quantum dynamics. I'm going to throw Dirac equation here. You go, that's the devil's work. And we know it works. Okay. It's just that Jesus was limited in what he could say to people at the time.
To that audience.
He encoded within what he said in those words that will not fade away, according to him. Heaven and earth shall fade away, but my words will not. They're encoded. And I think they're for our generation. So I take a little bit of a different, point of view to Christianity than most do. I think there's more in it. I think it's encoded, and I think it should be tested.
Sure.
People are anxious to test the Shred of Turin, by the way, to death, but they haven't tested Jesus to death. The Romans did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And right now, people want to. People want
he defeated their test.
Right? And it's like, so who is this guy? What is he saying? This crap, King of the Jews, all of that stuff. And so they put him to the physical test, and he failed. He died. So wise guy, what are you going to say now that you've been nailed to a cross? That's eventually what happened.
Yeah.
And Idaho, by the way, in the book, actually comes to experience that. Please go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to ask because he's presented with right where we started with this too, with Frosty. That's the furthest out he's seen in a sense, right? That his personal experience, brings him to this sense that the end of the line, right? The furthest threshold that his life will possibly reach is a melted puddle.
Exactly.
Come late February, early March, somewhere in there. And so he's of course beset by the fear that brings on, because he knows now enough about time to know that he is progressing forward. It doesn't go backward. And all of this is hitting him in the context of this Christmas experience. And then, like I said, I don't want to give away too much here, but when he runs out, I didn't want to fail to mention this, because when you talked about his sort of fleeing the scene, in this sense of fear, and then he starts to hear the bells, I almost felt like, what came to my mind was this image of what we do, all of us maybe in some way, right? This moment that you have of, you have all, and we don't all have the same home situation. Of course, some people's home situations growing up are much better than others, of course, but in general, this path of kind of growing in this hopefully nurturing environment, being safe, ideally. But then there comes this moment when, for one reason or another, you leave that space, and you're out there in the elements, and you have this storm hit, which I that didn't miss my attention at all, and it just felt like a good allegory for just the human experience of the journey, and then the bells being this the voice of God, all these different ways that he can reach out to us to try to help us find that narrative thread again, amidst
Yes.
that chaos. So all of those things were definitely coming to mind.
And pivotal points in the book is when Idaho, deep in the woods, and he looks behind him, and the house that he came from has now disappeared, and he can't hear the bells anymore. So his past is gone, and the thing that was leading him into the future, the sound of the bells, he can't hear them anymore. So he's lost in the here and now. And so that, again, is an allusion to time. A peculiar thing about time is no matter what position you wake up in the morning, it's always now. I think Bill Murray made a great joke about what if tomorrow never comes? There wasn't one today.
Right.
We're always stuck between these two things in time. And
Was
that
that in Groundhog
sequential.
Day?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
Groundhog Day.
okay. I wondered because I love that movie, and that
Great
sounds like
line.
I couldn't remember that line. That's
Yeah.
something that would be in there.
Yeah, but that's, and again, that nightmare in that show is about it's always today, he
Yeah.
doesn't progress through time. So this notion of time being critical. And of course, Jesus does speak of the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He doesn't speak of it as being an eternity. He talks about another
Mm-hmm.
kind of eternity, which he refers to as the kingdom, but he doesn't include
Right.
time in that. And then he says,
Right.
before Abraham
And
was.
I teach that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to throw in there that's something I try to get across in discussions with my students when we talk about some basic kind of eschatology. Is this notion of it's not just like whatever heaven is. It's not just never ending this.
That's correct.
It's not just extension indefinitely of the stuff you're used to now, which would get boring.
Of course, it would. And Jesus said things like, before Abraham was, I am. He's negating the notion of time there. Just like the scientist I mentioned, mathematician, really, logician, that I mentioned that was Einstein's friend, said, I look at general relativity and I analyze it, and sequential time is not part of any universe in which general relativity, theory of gravity, holds sway. So you have Jesus saying something all the way back then, and I think he's the greatest logician to ever have lived, saying time doesn't exist. And Jesus is negating time. Before Abraham was, I am. And he talks about the end of time. Jesus has a different perception of what time is than our daily experience of it. Kurt Gödel is actually wrote, the Einstein friend, actually wrote a proof for the existence of God, which, like so much other stuff, didn't get published because his friends convinced him not to do it, that it would be deadly to his career.
For his career, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh. Well, let me just to shift gears and ask you about this a little bit too, because we can go back and forth to the book, but like I keep saying, I don't want to give too much away, but we have this culminating, you could say, kind of encounter, right? The Idaho with, let's just say, the core of the Christmas story and what it's really all about, and to kind of maybe unpack that a little bit, however you'd like to, how do you see what you've alluded to a little bit already, some of the primary issues here? We've titled this "Taking Back Christmas." What do you understand that to mean, and what are some things that you think are making that a more or less urgent, sort of necessity?
I think when you say that, the knee-jerk reaction, taking back Christmas, people go, yeah, that commercialization is, really bad. And that's not specifically it. I think it's something more insidious than that. I think that there's a concerted effort in order for people who are in power or seek power to discredit Jesus and embarrass people out of it. Now, when I look at American history, what I see is the church establishing the hospitals, the church establishing, and I don't mean just the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church predominantly, the educational system, and it worked very well. It was the greatest educational system ever in this country. And then the government said, oh, we're going to take it over. we're going to be the ones who train the mind of your kid. Okay. He's going to know what we tell him and nothing else. And the parents say, oh, isn't that our job? And it's like, shut up. We're doing it. They've basically robbed the population to set up a school system, which is doing their bidding and robbing everybody's money to support it. Then a Christian or a Catholic says, wait a minute, I'd like to send my kids to this school. And they go, oh, you're free. Isn't that great? You're free to do that. Except you're going to use your own money to do it, not the money you paid us for the education that your child is entitled to. We're going to take that. We're going to use that for our purposes. And you got to come up with the money to send a kid to the school you want to. Well, in the Constitution, there's a thing called freedom of press. They knew how dangerous it was if the government controlled the press. How much more dangerous is it if it's a child and not some guy at breakfast reading a newspaper, and they're controlling the information flow? I can tell you that you could talk about physics being the basis of everything, or religion being the basis of everything. The basis of everything is information. It's letter I, lowercase I, is for information. That's the fundamental theory of what we're experiencing. And that's where all the answers are found. And they're holding that information in their hands, robbing you, and not giving you what you're entitled to and calling it freedom. Now everybody can get an education. Yeah, everybody can get propaganda. So what's happening with Christmas is part of a greater thing, that you've got to be ashamed to believe in a religion, ashamed to believe in Christ, ashamed to believe in God. And they do shame people. When you rip that out of the history books, what kind of a history? How do you explain the Crusade? How do you explain? And it's one of the greatest proofs for the existence, as if you needed it, for the existence of Jesus, is what happened after. How Christianity spread like wildfire. I used to read books where they denied the historical existence of Jesus. They don't anymore. Even people like Bart Ehrman admit that he's the best documented person at that time in history. And he told us about other people like Pontius Pilate. And then they find, here's a placard that says Pontius Pilate. We only knew about him from the Gospels. So Jesus goes and raises from the dead. He starts appearing to his followers, okay? And that's recorded in the New Testament. What did he say? What did he teach when he came back from the dead? This is a man who went to the other side and under his own power came back, appearing, disappearing in front of people. What did Jesus teach in the post-resurrection period? It's not included in the Gospels. They talk about his thing. He stayed with them, on earth, among these people. He ate with them, they
for
touched
almost a month
him.
and a half.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of eyewitnesses. Yeah. That's an interesting point.
What did he say? They didn't include it. Oh, I guess they forgot. Right. I guess that the gospel writer, the evangelist, forgot to include what Jesus said. He in one of the Gnostic Gospels, Jesus says, I can answer every question you have now because he's proven himself, okay? But you don't ask me. How come we're not asking? I mean, how come we're not asking? And why, in your righteous mind, would you think the evangelist wouldn't include one word of Jesus' teaching in the post-resurrection period? Oh, I guess he came and stayed us for all those days, and was mute.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that not brought up? When was the last time you heard a sermon that pointed that out?
I don't remember the last time I prayed or asked God to help me do Christmas well. And that's a little embarrassing to admit, but I was just thinking about that. We do, some of us, we have certain liturgical practices. We have certain, maybe non-liturgical, but maybe say family traditions. There's cultural traditions. There's all these kinds of layers of tradition, which, are as good as they go. They're maybe fine. But, I don't know to put you on the spot with something like that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, asking God, taking it to him, like Idaho, maybe, right? this
Mhm.
this desire, or Lord, give me a desire to more adequately or more sincerely welcome you, into my own manger this year. That's a trope sometimes we'll hear, but I think it's a good, maybe reflection point.
I think that the best prayer you can do is, it's an honest thing. When you pray personally, okay, there's nobody watching, okay, and you're being a complete idiot. You're talking to that holy darkness, as
Yeah.
as it was once said. It's honest. It's just you and whatever you think it is out there, okay.
Mm-hmm.
In that, you shouldn't vacate your responsibility to think about these things and the things that were said. And I think
Right.
that people get the notion that salvation is not on an individual level. It is. It's personal. This
Mm-hmm.
guy makes it and this guy doesn't. Sometimes I have a problem when
Mm-hmm.
people ask me if I'm a Christian. Not for me to say. I'm going to find out. What I fully expect I'm going to be
Yeah, I might
Jesus.
have called myself one. Yeah, like we'll
Exactly.
we'll
And
see.
it's
That's
like
a good,
calling
yeah.
yourself a guitarist, and then some shredder comes along who really knows how to play, right? And then he goes, how you've been calling yourself a guitarist? Well, you stink. Well, if
Amen.
Jesus says I stink, I hope he's talking about my
Yeah.
guitar playing. That's all I can say.
Right.
Okay. But I think
Yeah.
people do not take it seriously enough. I don't think they're analytical enough. And I don't think they take what we know now and apply it to the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And just a word personally for you,
Sure.
I went through the basically entirely, I think, the Catholic educational system. My kids went through the
Mm-hmm.
Catholic educational system, and I am eternally grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's not because I'm a robot and not because I believe everything they said. They opened my eyes to things I never would have known.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
I know you teach or have taught
Yeah.
in the Catholic
Mm-hmm.
school system. And I just want to say it's a fabulous thing. And I hope you don't take offense at my efforts to go somewhat beyond what I've been given. There's a
Yeah.
parable about a rich man who gives his son a certain amount of money, two sons, and he gives one the amount of money and the other one the same amount of money. And then after a
Mm-hmm.
while, he checks back with him. He says, "What have you done?" The guy says, "Yeah, I took it, man. I put it in the bank. I kept it safe,
Yep.
and here it is." And the other guy
Right.
invested it, and now he's got this much more. If we
Yeah.
just take what we're given and don't do anything with it, and thinking,
Mm-hmm.
reading relativity, is a religious thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I just don't see why Jesus wouldn't have had a good conversation with Einstein. He would have.
Well, I was just reflecting on that the other day too, as this, it's maybe a Franciscan sensibility in me, but which is, you know, anything but nature worship. It's this recognition in nature, in every aspect of nature, and every natural law, and every law of physics, and every you know everything about reality. A fingerprint, a fingerprint of God distinct from him. So it's, again, not pantheist. So like I was thinking about this yesterday as Christmas nears, and just the all of how I don't know, it's such a unique holiday to me, the way that there's so much involved in the experience of it, the expression of it, the sights, the smells, the sounds, the seasonal stuff, the animals incorporated, the heavenly bodies. It's like this victory lap,
Yeah.
of God going through a lot of these same categories. That might be a neat study, but the categories of the 6 days of creation, it's like you see them all again, showing up, and it's I'm jumping around here to so many different things, but I really love, your book is so beautiful, I think, at bringing together all of these different layers, these different allegorical connections, and some of which I think I might have tapped into, others I'm sure
Yes,
are
you
there to go
have.
deeper into. But let me just ask you, Ray, just, we have maybe about 3 or 4 minutes here left. Is there anything else, like, just that you'd like to encourage the audience regarding the book? Of course, we have linked everything below, but just encouragement or advice, on how to go deeper into Christmas, how they might be able to think about taking it back and really living it in a much more enriching way this particular season.
Thing Thing about Christmas and the worst part of Christmas is when Christmas is over. I always think as Christmas as being non-Gaussian in the sense that it does not follow the normal bell curve. What happens with Christmas is the excitement builds and builds and builds, and the climax is, and then it's Christmas, and then it's gone. People are stripping the
Like
stores
noon on
naked.
Christmas Day, they're done.
Right.
That's when it's supposed to start. Yeah.
Right. That feeling of disappointment, of loss, not just because you didn't get the toaster oven you wanted or whatever, it's not that. It's because you haven't gotten out of it what's actually there. And that's the point of the book. If I could afford to give it away, I'd give it. It's too bad you have to charge for stuff like this.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think it should be read. And if you can't afford the book, the CD is only a few bucks. And if you want to go on the audio version of it, it's only a few bucks.
It's fun.
But it's so much look fun, into it. There's a lot there. And I think it's not being handled well. I don't think Jesus is taken as seriously as he should have been and he should be.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Well, Ray,
Sorry
there's so much more I could.
Stuff.
Oh no! And everything connects.
It does
in the end somehow, and I mean, because that's there's all the questions that he immediately causes us to bring. It's like everyone always says Christ is the answer, which I could not agree with more. But he also, in presenting that answer to us, I think he encourages lots of questions and is so good, right, at telling us to ask different questions sometimes too.
What would you say the main question is? If Jesus is the answer, what was the question?
Oh my, yeah. What I think of it in terms of just because this is what always happens with me is why am I here? Why am I here? What why is it that I exist when I didn't choose to exist? I had no say in my existence, and I've heard some really nihilistic folks talk about that in a genuine, sincere anger that they wish they didn't. And I feel like, and at least speaking from my own experience, that every single time I have ever seriously been battling with that question, he's always there, and it's not always the same way twice, but he inserts himself in this very polite way, but direct way. I can't ever really seem to get away from him having something to do with it. And the more that's happened through my life, the more I would then ask him directly.
It's a good answer,
and,
but
that's what I think,
In addition to that, you probably should expand it a little bit. It's like, what is this place?
Yeah.
How did it get here? How did I get into this thing? How is the only way out of this thing? Nobody gets out of here alive. So that's not cool, So
am I going to be that puddle of water?
If you think of it, it involves cosmology, physics, information theory, the Gospels. Yeah. It includes tons of stuff. And that's why
literature, drama, like every human endeavor.
Correct. And loving your fellow man enough to listen to them and empathize with them, So all that's involved. And that's kind of what the subtext of Christmas in Idaho is about. It's about trying to take you on the journey back to the original Christmas and beyond, and encounter Christmas, Jesus, resurrection, the whole 9 yards, and what acceptance of Christianity means to the individual. That's what I tried to do in it. And unless you read it, you're not going to know if I got there. So give it a read.
Right. Well, I think that's maybe a great note to end on there, Ray. Thank you so much for coming on today.
So
like I said, we're going to get the word spread, and God bless you. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
You too. Take care, huh?
What a true delight that was. Really interesting conversation. We got into a lot of different stuff neither one of us, I think, anticipated, and just some very interesting food for thought there for all of you and for all of us. But above all things, I just want to wish you all a very merry and blessed Christmas. That last thing I was kind of getting at the end of our conversation there is something I'm personally taking away from this importance of bringing our own Christmas experience to Christ, bringing it to Him, bringing it to the Father by the power of the Holy Spirit, and saying, Lord, help me. Help me to have an experience of Christmas that is one that you want me to have. Help me to taste it, to smell it, to feel the truth in this, something that is so much more than just a story, something that is way beyond a legend, as C.S. Lewis, referred to this true myth, right? That this story has so many mythical elements to it, but that this is the true myth. This is the ultimate. This is the core. This is that to which all points, and that's something Ray was getting at, I think, as well. All of these different disciplines, all these different human endeavors, that reality itself, the creation itself, the very fabric of reality itself points back to the one who made it, and he, in his humility, joins the story himself in a cave, and that's what we celebrate, his arrival. So, give him some room in your own heart, the manger of your own heart this season. God bless you all. See you in the new year, and until next time, don't forget to wonder. Take care.